Noise with computers. This is one of the things I do an awful lot in my lab. And so this is the talk, NoiseMakers, the next generation. So I'm David Gerhardt, if you haven't met me before, and I work in the Armadillo Research Lab, which is the rough music and audio digital interaction lab. We have a nice logo. We have all sorts of great stuff happening there. Music is one of the things we spend a lot of time on, and so it's very exciting that I get a chance to talk about that here today, obviously from the University of Regina. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to start with a demonstration. I don't know if you notice this if you give talks regularly, but demonstrations tempt the gods, and it's not always a good idea to do demonstrations, but I'm going to start. Before I give a demonstration, I'm going to show a video, and if you've seen this video online, stick up your hand or otherwise acknowledge it. But this is a video about a guy who turned his kitchen into a synthesizer. How many people have seen this video?
I'm going to make a synthesizer out of old electronics.
I'm going to show the whole thing.
I'm going to use it to turn our kitchen into a gigantic musical instrument. And here we go. Kenny, the power, please. Yes. Okay. Here you go. Power. Nice. Alright. And hopefully this will not affect what you need. No! It works! Hey, it works! It works! Genius!
So at this point, I have to actually break in and say I was very excited to watch this until the guy who made it admitted that it was fake. I was so disillusioned, but not before we got a phone call from a local television affiliate saying, "Hey, we saw this video and it's really cool. And does it work? And how can you give us a demonstration or something like that?" And we were like, "Sure, I guess." And so my student Brett and I made this thing which we call the Instant Instrument Anywhere, and it is going to work for us today. So if you notice, it's a similar arrangement, not exactly the porcelain bowls, but it's the same kind of idea. And then, when you, see? Coffee cups. And I'm making music. Now, if you call that music, right? But I'm making music with the coffee. So there's my first demo of the night, and it works. All right. So what is this thing? And I'll talk a bit more about the kind of stuff we built in the lab. But this is actually a little device made out of an Arduino, if you've ever heard of this before. If you came to my early talk last September, you would have seen Arduinos and what they work and how they are constructed. So what this thing does, actually, is it senses your fingers near these coffee cups, which actually have tinfoil inside them, and measures the capacitance and uses that to trigger a signal that will start a noise that then you can amplify and play back. But the question is that actually a musical instrument? Or is it just a bunch of electronics that make noise? And that's one of the deep philosophical questions we're going to explore tonight. So, if I were to show you this, would you say, by show of hands, that this is a musical instrument? Yes. How many people will recognize what this is? An organ. An organ. This is actually, anybody recognize which organ this is? This is the pipe organ in Oudkirk in Delft. I've seen this organ with my very eyes. This is an organ which is so old, they didn't even use the standard manual for keyboards. It's a very interesting and different kind of interaction therefore. Anyway, so this, I got a positive show of hands saying this is a musical instrument. What about this thing? Anybody recognize what this is? This is an art installation called Cracked Ray 2. And what they did is they put a bunch of televisions in a pile, and then they wired the audio feed from one television into the video feed from another, and then the video feed from that television into the audio feed from another, and get them all wired in back to themselves, and then it Yeah, so is that a musical instrument? Stick your hand up if you would say that that is a musical instrument. Thanks, Dan, for that. Great. So, a minority. Now, I'm making fun of it a little bit, but this actually won second place in the Margaret Gutman musical instrument competition that happened in Atlanta not too long ago. So, I don't have a video of this, but here's another example. Is this a musical instrument? Yes. Yes. What is this? French horn, one of the more difficult horn-style instruments to play. What about this? Electric guitar, right? Now, this one gets interesting because depending on how you play a guitar, and depending on the generation from which you come, you might decide that the music coming out of this would be music or not, right? If you are a person of the generation who has grown up with somebody like Jimi Hendrix playing on this, right? Now, what about your parents' generation then? Would your parents call Jimi Hendrix playing on this music, or would they call it noise? Right? This is the eternal question, and this is the eternal progression that we get from one generation's noise is the previous generation's, one generation's music is the, so there's music and noise, and it's a different definition. What about this thing? This is a piano, but this isn't just a piano. This is a Yamaha Disclavier. Now, this is a fantastic instrument because it's a piano, but it also has a computer screen, little media player. It's a digital player piano, but it's set up in a way that it can actually record the performance of a virtuoso piano player. So we can play the piano and press record and play it back, and instead of it sounding like a robot, it sounds like the person who was just playing it. Beautiful, beautiful instrument. I think we need to have a dozen of these on campus. Who has the budget for that? Nice to have. Anyway, what about this? Now we're getting into something that's very, very interesting. Because this is something that will define the generations that are present in this group. Most of us agreed, I think, that this was a musical instrument. What about this thing? Who will stick up your hand and say if this is a musical instrument or not? Yes? I'm getting a lot of yeses. I'm going to say, no way. This is just pressing play on a tape. Ah, yes. So there is actually a difference. And it's not, the dark hairs versus the gray hairs. It's actually quite a diversity of opinions. And it depends on how this thing is played. Right? What about this thing? How many even know what this is? It's the last in my list of music. This is an MPC. This is a digital sound trigger device. Each of these buttons, you can press a button and it will trigger a different sound. Each of these knobs has a particular control that does a thing that makes it sound different, whatever. This is an instrument that people use quite frequently these days. This is very popular musical instrument. How many people have ever played an MPC before? In performance, maybe, or in a lab somewhere on campus, or whatever? No? Few people? Not even one? How many have seen somebody perform? Oh, yes, over here. Yes.
They use it at the Imp Lab.
At the Imp Lab, yes, they have these at the Imp Lab. How many people know what the Imp Lab is? Go Google the Imp Lab if you know what it is. Okay, so how many people have seen somebody perform one of these things on stage? Awesome, awesome. Here is an example of somebody performing one of these things on stage. Now, is this a musician? This gets exciting because this is actually a guy named Deadmau5, or if you've only seen him written down, it would be Deadmau5, because you have to actually figure out what he says. So this is Deadmau5. He's actually a Toronto-based electronic music performer, and if you haven't seen one of the shows, go see one of the shows. It's amazing. Dependent on, what kind of music you're into. So this is Deadmau5, and if I was going to talk about Deadmau5, I could also talk about another guy, which I'm just going to show you an example of the kind of music and the kind of performance. So it might be a little loud, if you're somebody who doesn't like loud things.
Love is a train of diminishing return.
Who's that? Who can name me that performer?
Screw
it! Thank you! Skrillex is interesting because Skrillex is one of the few sort of electronica dubstep performers that is starting to branch into the mainstream. So he's winning, you know, music awards alongside people who do like polka. It's very interesting culturally to see how that kind of stuff happens. Now, did you notice though the way he was performing and the way that the crowd was responding to it? Right? This is very different than orchestral music. This is very different from folk music or blues or rock or something like that. It's a new genre. How many people have Skrillex on their iPod? How many people have never before heard of Skrillex except right now? It's the difference in the generational thing, right? The other thing to be aware of is for both Deadmau5 and Skrillex, there's MPC, there's digital turntables, but there's this thing on stage too, right? I won't make you listen to Skrillex again, but the laptop is becoming a performance instrument. It's becoming a thing that you see on stage that people are using to perform. And it's very, very interesting to see this become an instrument. We'll get back to that in a second. All right. Gonna go to a quiz. How many of you know one or the other of these two performers? Stick up your hand if you know one or the other of these two performers. Stick up your hand if you know both of these performers. You know both of these performers, yeah? A couple of people. All right, everybody, who's this? Thanks. Who is this? Daft Punk. Daft Punk. Modern Electronica did the soundtrack for the Tron movie. Awesome, awesome stuff. Who is this?
Either Stevie Wonder or Ike Turner.
Stevie Wonder. That's not a great picture of Stevie Wonder. This is Stevie Wonder in the 70s. Okay? Now, the really interesting question is, what is the similarity between Daft Punk and Stevie Wonder? And if you don't know one or the other, both of these, just look at their pictures and you can imagine their performance styles, right? This is very, you know, Deadmau5 kind of performance art, kind of performance style. This is really, you know, rootsy funk kind of, you know, low level, everything has to be honest kind of stuff. So, between the two of these, what could possibly be common?
Vision.
Vision.
They both use synthesizers.
Synthesizers, absolutely, yeah.
Creativity.
Creativity, absolutely. For sure, each one is pushing forward the genre that they're working with. I was thinking really, really low level. They both use this instrument. They both use a talk box. Now, this looks like, well, what does this look like? I don't know, it's got like surgical tubing coming out of it, and it's like a button you press with your foot. A little odd, right? A talk box is a really, really cool electronic instrument, and I wish I had one with me, because it's a very neat demonstration to show. Here's what it sounds like, and I'm going to play you some Daft Punk first, and then I'm going to play you some Stevie Wonder, both of which using the same instrument. How many of you have heard that song before? Strangely, more than could identify Daft Punk by feel. By look, that's odd. Anyway, so that's a talk box. And here's Stevie Wonder playing the talk box. So very different forms and styles of music, but a similar kind of, you know, presence. All right, so here's the science portion of the show. How the heck does a talk box work? What is it? Well, to understand how a talk box works, this is actually a good introduction to a lot of modern synthesizers and musical instruments, because the talk box takes your vocal tract and does weird stuff to it. So, before we learn that, how do you actually speak? How does sound come out of your mouth? There's two parts to it. The first is down here in your larynx. There's these little vibrating vocal folds. They make a buzzing sound, okay? If it was just those, all you would do is buzz. You just all the time. Some people already do that. Anyway, but there's more than just this. This is the source of the sound. This vibration is what causes the sound to make noise. But there's more to it than that, because this sound doesn't just emanate from your throat, it goes up through the vocal tract, up through your nose and through your mouth and over your tongue and your teeth and your lips, the tip of the tongue and the teeth. And this is actually a filter which shapes and molds and forms the sound into every vowel and consonant that we speak. Okay? So every vowel and consonant that we speak comes from the same source, the same vocal folds making the same noise, but depending on where your tongue and your teeth and your lips are, you get ah or oo or a or ah. Okay? So this is how we speak. The talk box takes this source and replaces it with some other sound. Okay? So in this case, in the case of Stevie Wonder, what he's done is he's got a synthesizer in front of him, and he's playing a synthesizer, and that synthesizer is hooked up to a little speaker connected to a little surgical tube, which he actually holds in his mouth. Okay? And that will make a resonant sound that then gets shaped by his vocal tract. Okay? This is how a talk box works, and it's the same whether it's Daft Punk playing it or Stevie Wonder playing it. The cool thing about it is that you're no longer constrained by the physical limitations of your larynx. Right? I can sing down here and up here, but that's about all I can do. If I want to sing a note that's lower than that, my larynx can't do it. Darn larynx! So instead, I have a sound source that's much lower frequency, and I can generate a really, really low note, right? Or a very, very high note, depending on what I want to do. Plus, the nice thing about that is every note that you play is pitch accurate. So it's like auto-tuning before auto-tuning. All right, so this is really interesting, because this concept of a source manipulated by a filter generating sound is actually the basis for a lot of traditional music and a lot of new digital music. So, here's an example. How many people play the trumpet? Okay, here's another example. Okay, so if you've ever played any kind of brass instrument at all, anybody play any brass at all, it comes in two pieces, right? There's the mouthpiece at the front, and then there's the tube that does the work. And these are actually the source and the filter of the sound that the trumpet generates. The source is the mouthpiece. So anybody who plays the trumpet or a horn of any kind, you take your mouthpiece out and you practice, and then you plug it into the rest of the horn and it makes a really nice noise. The source changes, the filter changes, and then you can manipulate both of them. Okay? Here's another example. Here's guitar. How many people play guitar? Okay? Knowing what you know now about the trumpet, what would you think would be the source and what would be the filter in the case of a guitar? The strings would be the source. Whoa. And you like that? I'm going to try that again. Whoa. The strings would be the source, and the body of the guitar would be the filter. It would resonate and change the sound so that it makes it more bigger or whatever, right? So, what about this kind of guitar? Slightly different. Perhaps it's your question. What is the source and what is the filter? The strings are the source. And the pickup. Yeah, there's more to it than that. Because if you play, how many people play electric guitar? A few people? If you play it without plugging it into anything, it doesn't sound like much. So what you need is a pickup and a bunch of other stuff. So the source is actually the whole guitar. And then this, wah, is the filter. You need a pedal board to manipulate the sound that's coming out of the guitar. You need an amp stack to make the sound coming out of the pedal board bigger and louder and more sort of, annoying, whatever. So this is now, the source is completely separated by a wire from the filter, right? And you can put any filter you want, and you can switch out the source. The really cool thing here also is that you have a lot of fine control just on the filter itself. And you have a lot of fine control on the source. Which pickup are you going to use? Are you going to use toning methods? Are you going to change the way that the strings are being played? So this is actually a really good place to start looking at how electronic music and electronic music instruments come together. Because this is desire to find complete control over the source, over what is actually driving the sound, and complete control over how the sound gets changed. And when we look in the electronic music field, we talk about a controller and a synthesizer rather than a source and a filter, because the controller makes electrical impulses. The synthesizer would then turn into music. So it's an even bigger separation. You can have situations where you have your controller in a different country, even. right? And it'll send messages over the internet to some synthesizer somewhere. So complete separation between the controller and the synthesizer, and it's all in pursuit of higher levels of expressivity. How do you get more out of a sound? How do you get more sound, more expression out of your sound? So I'm going to show you a few examples of expressivity in new digital instruments. Here are a few examples from a conference called the New Interfaces for Musical Expression Conference. This is a system called React Table. It's a projection-based table where there's a camera and a projector underneath the table, and you take these blocks with little patterns on them that you put the block on the table. The computer recognizes that block and says, I know what that block is. That block is a whatever block. And you can put the blocks in different orientations, you can turn them and manipulate them, and you build this really amazing controller out of these physical blocks. That's the React table. This is a guitar bot from Lemur. What is Lemur? Lemur is the League of Experimental Musical Urban Robots. Very cool group operating out of the States. This is actually an electric guitar robot. Okay, so you've got these little tracks that move up and down on strings like this, and then you got these little flexor wheels that pluck the strings. And this is a great little demonstration. What's happening is the computer is improvising against the violin player, who's improvising against the robot, and they're going back and forth. It's very cool. Don't have a video for these, unfortunately, but they're cool. This is like the talk box that I showed you before, except instead of using a tube, this one they've got a little camera. This isn't a microphone, this is a camera. And the camera is looking at the performer's mouth and doing some analysis on the sort of shape of the mouth. And so this person can change the tonality of the guitar based on the shape of their mouth. Kind of like the talk box, kind of different. This is called a tuca. This is a two-person wind instrument. Okay? Think about that for a second. A two-person wind instrument. What you have to do is you play it with a partner and you blow into it, and based on the differential pressure between your air and your partner's air, right? A little freaky, isn't it? Some of these things get a little bit intimate, I would say. You're good friends with your playing partner, but it's a collaborative experience, and it cannot be played by a single person. That's very interesting. Here's one that just came out. I just saw this video like a couple days ago. So what this person did is they hooked up a bunch of sensors and electrodes into their bike. And then as they bike around, it changes the sounds and makes new expressions. Very neat, because it's two differential forms of artistic expression that come together then and are synthesized. Right? Very neat. So, here, a few more that I want to talk about in a little bit of detail. These were from that same competition where the cracked ray tube was. These are from the Margaret Guthman Musical Instrument Competition in Atlanta. Four really, really neat and different kinds of electronic instruments that have really interesting things to say about the state of electronic music. This one here, this is called Coded Sensation. And it's a suit made out of, well, take a guess about what you think the suit might be made out of. It's actually made out of old audio cassettes. Old audio cassette tape. And then what the person did was they put the little tape readers, you know, like the playheads, on their fingers. And so they could like move back and forth like this. It would play, very cool, right? But then your performance is essentially you standing on stage touching yourself. Just, you know, I mean, I'm not sure how far that goes, but it's a great concept, right? Because it's using old technologies in a new way, and you're dressed in your repertoire. It's got all sorts of really neat metaphors. Anyway, this one here is a robot that has a string and an air column, and it can excite the air column based with the string, and excite the string based with the air column. It's very, very neat. This is called the brainstem cello. This one is cool. What happens is that you build this cello, and then on the base of the cello is all sorts of these little gadgets and gizmos that would do extra stuff. It would like ring a little bell or pluck a little string or something like that. But there's also these things that are intended to interfere with the playing of the cello. So there's a point at which where you have your strings like this, And then there's actually a piece of wood that the computer will push up through the string to prevent you from playing the string. You push the piece of wood up and then you're trying to play and you can't, right? So it's actually, I mean, his whole thing was about the instrument now becomes a competitor in the act of making music. You have to sort of fight against the competitor. It doesn't really matter what you do. You're not going to really get what you might traditionally call good music out of this thing. And that's part of the point of the performance, is how does the performer deal with the aggravation of having the instrument fight against it. Get it? Neither do I. All right. This one, though, is almost entirely the opposite. This is called musician makers. And each of these instruments is a whole suite of instruments where you have a very simple control. Like on this one, you twist. You blow on it and you twist. And based on how you twist, the computer will pick a note that's in the chord that's currently being played and say, okay, you want it to go higher, C sharp would sound really good right now, and it's higher, so I'm going to pick that note for you. So it's essentially instant, you pick it up and you can play it without any mistakes. Okay? Now, do you see the dichotomy here? This one, it doesn't matter what you do, the music will sound good. Okay? This one, it doesn't matter what you do, the music will sound bad. Okay? And this is the variation in the kind of development of new musical instruments that are making these days. Okay? And I think, personally, that if it doesn't matter what you do, then maybe I want to be in the middle here somewhere, where it does matter what I do, kind of. I'd like to think that it matters what I do. So, I don't know, I mean, it's very interesting to explore the different ranges of this, but this is essentially Wii music. How many of you have played Wii music before? How many of you have a Wii at your house? How many of you have a television set at your house? Work with me, people! So Wii music is a video game on the Wii console, and the idea is you have your Wii remote, and you sort of shake it this way. I've never played it, I don't even know. You shake it this way, shake it that way, and it makes good music. And it makes good music no matter what you do, right? So you don't really have any control over it. So I'm more interested in the kind of things where there's a lot of control over it. So, a lot of really interesting dichotomies in what people are developing now, but I think the most telling feature of this is that there is something common amongst all four of these performers. It's a bit of a cheat, because one of them's different. They all have laptops on stage, right? Like I was talking about before. The laptop is becoming the de facto musical instrument that electronic people are starting to play. To the point where people are actually gathering together laptop orchestras. Okay, and this has been going on for quite a while now, actually. There's a lot of professional laptop orchestras out there. This one is called Plork. This is the Princeton Laptop Orchestra, and it's a really interesting concept because it's sort of an attempt to pull together the musician who's playing and the place where the sound comes from. Okay? Notice here each musician, each laptop player, whatever, has a little sound kit and a little speaker. And so it's more like when you're sitting in an orchestra and you can tell that the violas are over there and the bassoons are over there and oh, there's a French horn doing something, and you can hear that because you can tell they're coming from different directions. Right? With traditional electronic music, and in fact traditional stage music of any kind right now, right? I'm singing up on stage, I got my microphone, I got my guitar, whatever. Nothing is coming from here. It's coming from the speaker stack over there. Right? So this is an attempt to reunite the actual sound generation to the person it's coming from. And you also get a lot of expressivity on a laptop that you wouldn't get in other places. Okay? But there's a problem. This is the problem. Is this person making music or checking their email? Right? What about these people? Are these people checking music or doing Facebook? It's hard to tell. I can't tell. And this is a really interesting problem because it actually speaks to the fact that musical performance, on-stage performance, is more than just the sound that comes out of the speakers. Right? It's the expressivity, it's the performance, it's the ability for the audience to connect with the musicians. And when this is your musician, right, doing a little Twitter or whatever, it's very difficult. You get this increase in expressivity because you can make whatever kind of sounds you want. Literally infinite, because you write your own code. You can do whatever you want. And the performance goes way down. because you can't connect with your audience if you're sitting there doing your laptop thing, right? Now, people have tried to make the performative aspect of laptop orchestras a bit more. It's actually not as crazy as it looks, because what's happening here is, I don't know if you know this, but most laptops have accelerometers built in. Okay, an accelerometer is a device that measures the motion of a device, and so if the laptop, falls on the ground, the laptop itself will say, "Hey, I'm falling. Let's put things away before I fall," and it'll protect the device. Now, we can use those accelerometers to make music, but you're still using a laptop, and there's a lot of other devices around that have accelerometers. Like, for example, these things, which I've been waving around, right? So, let's tempt the gods one more time. Let's see if this is going to work. I'm going to try to do a demonstration. I was going to have this all ready to go. Oh, wait, that's ready to go. Good. Try this here. Dopey-dopey-do. Start this. I'm going to try to do a little demonstration of using accelerometers to make music with these Wii remotes. Wii remotes are awesome things. If I can get them to work. Try one more time. No. So what I have to do is I have to tell the computer and the Wiimote to talk to each other. And then once they talk to each other, I have to tell them exactly what to do. And then, is that gonna, nice! It works! I'm a genius! So what I've got here is a little visualization of these two Wii remotes. Okay? This is the whole real-time Bluetooth radio into the computer kind of thing. That's really, really neat. So not only can you see that the two different Wiimotes are doing two different things, but you can hear them. Right? Or I do this for the people who aren't in the talk right now. They're like, what is going on in there? And this is the performative aspect too. You can't just you gotta really get into it. You gotta sell it, right? So, anybody wanna try it? Anyway, we'll do it afterwards. So this is an accelerometer-based musical instrument, right? And it's not that hard to set up. You don't have to carry your laptop around with you. So those are awesome. I'm gonna just let that keep running in the background for a while, because why not? So that's two demos that worked. All right. But that's not the only device that has an accelerometer built in, right? There's also these awesome things that have accelerometers and stuff built in. And, right, these awesome things. You have a smartphone in your pocket right now. You've got a musical instrument with you, right? And because they have all these amazing sensors and functionality built into them that you can repurpose in order to make really meaningful music, right? So all of this kind of stuff, I'm going to show you a few demos that focus on the multi-touchability of the iPad. Okay? Now, these I didn't necessarily write myself. Some of them, we'll get to that in a second. But none of them are in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, here we go. So, more demonstrations. So what I've got here is a bunch of demonstrations. Cool. All right. First one. This is there we go. This is a simple app called Bebop. Look at it. This was one of the first musical apps that I ever got. This was around on the iPhone long before the iPad came out. And he's really, really cute. What you have here on the touch screen is you've got two dimensions of playing it. So you have mod in the up direction, and then pitch in that direction. You can do. Wait, no, here we go. There we go. So you can also do theremin, obviously. So what they've done is they've actually set it up so that you can either decide to play every note, or you can play sort of a subset of notes, like the music maker, right? You play a note somewhere here, and the machine decides that that's that white note right there. You can't see what I'm touching, but I'm not even looking. I'm just... So yeah, b-ball, awesome, very fun. What's next? There was this guy. This is a drum machine. Have you ever played the drum machine before?
You will recognize some of the synthesizers that are built into these, but this is starting to recognize that there's all sorts of great sort of extra functionality you can build into these things. So, nice little beat, whatever, but now I can do what Skrillex did. Watch this, here we go. Yeah, so I have to make that. Oopsie. Whatever, and you can also set up, like, you can decide where the notes are going to go. And sounds like crap, so we'll carry on. This one is similar in a way, but different. This is called Beatwave, and it's based on a concept called the monome. The monome is essentially a grid of buttons. And the point of this grid of buttons is that when you press a button, that button suddenly becomes a note every time this playhead passes by. Okay? And so you can build these really neat ethereal kind of rhythms and patterns and whatever kind of stuff. Anyway, so the point is, there's a lot of really, really cool applications on the App Store that allow you to do really neat digital music. I want to show you one more. Wait, what do I want to show you? Because I want to be able to dive into, oh yeah, I want to talk one more thing before I show you this. This is the culmination of the talk, just so you know. Stay tuned. I want to do one more little thing about these new kind of musical systems, because there's a problem. The problem with these new kind of musical systems is, how do you learn them? Where do you start? Especially if people are building new ones of these all the time, right? If I decide that we're going to build a new instrument like this coffee cup thing, and I want people to use it like a real instrument, I want people to develop a practice around it, I want people to compose for it or whatever, I need to get people to be able to learn this thing, okay? But there's a challenge, just like with every other kind of musical instrument, it takes a bit of work to learn a musical instrument, right? It's not the kind of thing you can pick up and start playing. There's a concept in the new music instrument field called, well, we talked about the dichotomy between an entry fee and virtuosity. We want to have an instrument that has a low entry fee. We want an instrument that you can pick up and play and just start moving. But we also don't want to have some sort of a limit on how far you can go with this instrument, right? This coffee cup instrument, you press a coffee cup and it makes a noise, right? But there's only so far you can go. So what we want to do is explore this range. And this range isn't just about electronic instruments, it's about traditional instruments as well. Tell me this, does this picture fill you with joy or dread? Imagine, if you will, 5-year-old child picking up a violin for the first time. Okay, it's this beautiful, serene moment. She's angelic. You can almost see angel wings in the background. She picks up this instrument and she's just beginning her career as a brilliant concert violinist. And those of you with smiles on your faces know what's coming next, right? You cannot make a good noise with this thing when you first pick it up. It is impossible to do. You have to be shown how to be gentle and play and make it, and then it takes a long time before you can actually start to make noise that you personally would enjoy listening to. And this is a challenge for musical instruments all over the place, because if it takes you a long time to be able to make a noise that you personally would enjoy listening to, why the heck would you continue except on threat of punishment from your parents? Right? Same is true of a lot of instruments. But the thing about the violin is, although it has a high entry, right, it takes a long time to get to the point where you can make music you'd like to hear. It has no limit on virtuosity. Right? The sort of good violin players will say, yeah, I'm a pretty good violin player. But the great violin players, the violin players who've been playing forever, will say,
I have so much more to learn. Right? This is the hallmark of an instrument that has no limit on the virtuosity, because there's always more you can do with it. Right? As opposed to which has what we call a low entry. Anybody can pick it up and start making music. However, there's only so far you can go. You don't have virtuoso kazoo players, you don't have kazoo master classes. I used to have harmonica on this picture, but then I saw that video that was going around a few weeks ago about that harmonica player at the Carnegie Hall. You guys see this thing? And he's like, and it was amazing. And I'm like, okay, harmonica is off. Let's do kazoo instead. Harmonica is interesting though because it has a low entry. Right? The learning curve for harmonica is in the middle somewhere. Right? It doesn't take a long time to ramp up. You just blow into it, and it makes a major chord, and you draw, and it draws, and it goes. But somewhere in the middle, you have to learn all the bending and the weirdness until you can get the really, really amazing sounds out of it. Right? So, another person suggested spoon would be a good instrument. Low entry key, but limit on virtuosity. So we're now interested, though, in finding or creating an instrument that has a low entry key, but no limit on virtuosity. And that is the goal of the rainboard, which is this thing. And I'm going to show you a little bit about it first, and then I'm going to play you a concert so you can hear it. This is the software, and this is all custom software written by Brett, my PhD student, who is right over there, and amazing. For sale, by the way, $1 in the App Store. Go and buy it. I'll wait. So what we've done, let me set this up in a way that's going to be a little bit easy to recognize first. We're going to make it look like we might have been recognizing it before. Let's see now. Why don't we do this layout? The cool thing about this app is that we can actually set up any kind of layout, any kind of arrangement you want, but you still don't quite know what's going on yet. So I will show you what's going on in a very basic way. So what we've done is we said there's a problem with the arrangement of musical notes. Okay? The problem with the traditional arrangement of musical notes, which is the piano arrangement, that's the one most people are familiar with. The problem with that is that the notes that are close together are not harmonically close together. Right? The notes that are close together are a semitone apart, which is the most dissonant of intervals. Okay? In order to play notes that are harmonically related, you have to go 3 notes away. And we thought there are ways to do this, but we're not the first people to think about this. This has been done since the 1700s. We're just the first people to get it right. Anyway, what we've done is we said, here's a way now to put notes close together that are harmonically related. So in this example, what we've done is we've said, why don't we see what happens if we take, we're going to take 2 common intervals. Well, come on, George. Do this thing. Okay, so 2 common intervals. The first is the augmented or major third. Okay, we put those all along in the northeasterly direction. Okay? On. Right? And then we're going to take the diminished or minor third. Okay, we're going to put it in the southeasterly direction, like this. And then, so that's really cool. And what we've done then is arranged all the notes then, so that wherever you are, you know where your major third is and your minor third. And that means if this is a major third and a minor third, these are semitones. It's still like semitones. It's not opposed to semitones. But what happens then is you take your major third and your minor third, starting from there. Alright, there's your major triad. But it's not just any major triad, it's every major triad. Because wherever you start, a major third and a minor third give you a major triad. So now, if you're a music student, if you're a piano student, you have to learn your triads, and you have to learn them in every different key. So with this, you only have to learn one. You only have to learn every scale once. Here's the major scale. One more time to show you. Okay? I just learned every major scale in every note. I've just subverted like 2 years of music.
So this is the idea, is that there's more regularity in music than traditional music instruments let on. And so our goal in this is to try to set it up so that people can get in here and bash notes and make mistakes and make things that they actually would like to listen to. So there's actually a problem with this, though, is that colors then are a little archaic, aren't they? Right? Because they're the colors that are based on the C major, C Ionian scale. But what if those colors don't mean anything anymore? Why don't we instead color it based on the notes themselves? So G flat is red now, and G is sort of an orangish, right? And then you're not stuck into what's in the scale and what's out of the scale. Or we could do what's in the scale and what's out of the scale. Why don't we color it based on what's in the scale and what's out of the scale, but say we're not going to be too tied to C Ionian. Let's do that for, I don't know, well, B sharp doesn't make any sense. Why don't we do that for G, say, for example, Mixolydian. So now you have all your modes. The computer does your modes for you. You don't even have to think about your modes. Ah, Mixolydian. Right? And then you know that pattern, you can transfer that pattern anywhere. Ta-da! How many more years of music theory have we just supplanted by learning all your modes like that? Right? So the point is that we're trying to sort of get at the regularity that is inherent in music, the mathematics that's inherent in music, without making you worry too much about the interface that you're playing with. The interface takes care of itself. So I'm going to show you one more arrangement that is kind of cool. This one is called Wiki Hayden. This is one that actually concertinas are based off of. I'm going to turn this back to C Ionian just for fun, because why not? And then, because it's a little easier to recognize what's going on. That. So, what does this one do? What are the intervals here? Well, we've got whole tones in one direction. What are those? No. Fifths and fourths. Okay? So there's your major chord and your minor chord. The cool thing about this one is that all the sort of traditionally white notes are all in one column. So if you want to play in a scale, you just have to go up and down those white notes. And you can modulate just by moving back and forth, right? There we go. So, that's awesome. But there's another problem. The problem is, I can't play this without looking. Right? It's flat. There's no indication of where these things sort of go. And this is why, like my red face, this is why we took a step back and said, you know what, we really need a physical version of this. We need an object that we can play with those same features, the same reconfigurability, the same ability to change the way the notes work, the same ability to put any note we want wherever we want, and we want to be able to do so. I won't be able to show you any video anymore, but I do want to invite you to come up and see this thing if you want to. You've got the custom software interfaces with the device. That allows you to play it just like a regular musical instrument, because that's what it is. So, this wouldn't be a musical show without a concert, so here we go. Let's see now. Wait, what? Show you that it's actually completely reconfigurable, I'm going to change it to this thing. Nope. This one is better. So this one is actually highlights a blues scale, which is useful in some cases, but this one is kind of nice. Is that the right one? There it is. And I need to change the way it sounds because it would be better to sound a little bit different, like this. Anyway, you get the idea. So I really encourage you to come up and play this thing because it's a lot of fun to experience, and it's a technological marvel if you want to have a look at the underside of it. It's all wires and gizmos. It's driven by an Arduino just like that thing. But the cool thing about it is that it all goes away when you start to play it. It just becomes the notes and the relationships between those notes. So, that's the rain board, and that's my sort of investigation into the field of new digital musical instruments and where they're going and where they're coming from. So, any questions?